Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of American Rambler. I'm your host, Colin Woodward. Thank you for listening to the podcast. On today's show, I have Tim Vandenhoff. He is a filmmaker. He recently has made a film called Monumental Crossroads, which you can get on Amazon Prime. It is about the Civil War and Civil War memory, more specifically Confederate monuments and the white and black people throughout the South that have opinions on it, and pretty much I would say everyone has a strong opinion about the monuments that has given it any kind of thought. Certainly, we have seen the protests here in Richmond over the last few months. The Robert E. Lee statue is still up. There have been various legal appeals, and I think there is a trial set in October to see what the future of the monument is. But Jeb Stuart has been taken down, and Stonewall Jackson and Jefferson Davis. So progress is being made if you are on the left. But if you are on the right, you can take solace knowing there are still many, many monuments that are not being taken down right now and probably never will be, at least not anytime soon. So Tim looks at this debate and he meets some real interesting characters. It is an interesting film and also an entertaining one. So if you're interested in the Civil War and if you are an educator looking for a movie to show in your class that will get some debate going, I think you should definitely check out Monumental Crossroads. All right, what else is going on? This is the eve of my birthday. Tomorrow I'm turning 45. This will be up after my birthday. I've already gotten some pretty cool things. I got a big freezer for the kitchen. We were thinking about maybe having to put it out in the music shack, but it is a big freezer for all the things that are not fitting in our refrigerator right now. It was something that has annoyed me for a while because there's just too much. Things fall out when I'm looking for things. I can never find anything. So being a real dad, or at least this is one of the first real dad gifts I've gotten for my birthday, Sydney splurged and got me this big old freezer, which even if I'm never opening it, if we can just kind of put the stuff in there and forget about it, especially the ice. We never seem to have enough ice. Ice is a pain in the ass. We've never mastered the art of making ice. We don't have an ice maker, and the ice cube trays have not changed since probably they invented the refrigerator. But we were able to put a big old bag of ice in the freezer and just leave it there. I've got some other backup stuff. So I love freezing things, especially bread, because I hate it when it goes bad, and it goes bad quick in the South with all the heat and humidity, even indoors. Anyway, as you can tell, I have strong opinions about this freezer, and I'm very glad that I got a gift that I've wanted, and it's also practical and will preserve my sanity a bit in these COVID-y times. So got that already. I've got some stuff for the podcast, and I'm still kind of working out technologically, but turning 45, and I gotta say the 40s have not been fun. The last 3 years, for a variety of reasons, have not been great because of Trump and other things, but I'm hanging in there. I'm surviving. You know, if you're going to make it in this country, a lot of times you don't make it till you're 50. So I'm not scared about turning 50. I wasn't particularly scared about turning 40 either. But 40s, things start to go physically, so you got to be careful. Maybe cut back on some bad food and the booze, and maybe exercise a little more when you can. Keep yourself going. But, you know, as bad as things are with COVID and the politics and everything else with the economy, especially, glad to be around and turning 45. So probably be a typically low-key birthday tomorrow. It is hot here, so maybe I'll hit the pool, if not tomorrow, this weekend with the kids. So no one's home now. I'm enjoying the quiet time, and of course take that opportunity to do a podcast intro. But I was listening to some music. I was listening to the White Album on vinyl, which I've never done on headphones with the vinyl. I've had the vinyl for about a year. I think I might have got it as a birthday present last year. I've listened to this album hundreds of times. I'm not exaggerating. It's one of my top 5 albums, to be sure. Certainly it's my favorite Beatles album, and I've had it on tape, I've had it on CD, and now I have it on vinyl. I've had the mono version, but it was skipping. Someone got me the stereo version, and despite all the times that I've heard this album, there's still little things that I pick up. Have heard these songs so many times. I've played some of them all the way through and learned the various little parts. But when you are listening to it on vinyl, I don't know if it's just like the analog to analog transition, but things that might have gotten smoothed out on the CD, you can hear better. It's not quite like listening to it for the first time, but it is a cool experience to listen to it on headphones the way people were doing it in the 60s. And, you know, obviously it plays well out loud, but my wife was working, so I wanted to hear it on the headphones, and it was a slightly different and kind of better experience. All right, let's talk now with Dutch filmmaker Tim Vandenhoff. Where are you exactly? Are you in the Netherlands?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm in Rotterdam, the second city.
Okay. The second city, is that what they call it?
Well, I guess that's a bit of our Calimero complex, where we are always the second city to Amsterdam. Everybody knows Amsterdam,
right.
And oftentimes don't even know that it's the capital of the Netherlands. They think Amsterdam is the country. So, yeah, we have something to to look up to in that regard.
And how big is Rotterdam?
Rotterdam,
in terms of population.
Yeah, Rotterdam proper is about 600,000 people, and the greater area is over 1 million. So it's not that much smaller than Amsterdam, actually. And in terms of economy, I guess it's a bigger city because it's the third largest main port in the world. So there's a lot of economic activity here.
Did you grow up there?
Sort of, yeah. I grew up at the shore, 40 kilometers down of south of Rotterdam. But every time we would skip school, we would go hang out in the big city because that was where the adventure was. But I've been living here for the past 20 some years. So I consider myself a Rotterdam person.
How are things going with COVID right now?
Actually, we are heading in the wrong direction. We were one of the few countries that didn't do proper lockdowns, but something we called an intelligent lockdown, which was basically one big confusing mess as to what was closed and what wasn't. But it sort of worked because I think around early June, we started, getting back to normal, just using social distancing, but everything was starting up again. But people get a bit tired of following the rules, and especially the younger generation, they have a hard time applying themselves to these rules that they don't see any benefit to themselves. It doesn't benefit them. So we are actually experiencing big outbreaks now. Yeah, we're combating a second wave approaching.
I mean, as you know, it's been so chaotic in terms of country to country, and here, state versus state. I mean, I'm in Virginia, which has kind of been holding its own. It's been doing pretty well. We have a governor who's a doctor, so I think that is helpful. And since we're sort of a north-southern state, we haven't had the problems of a Florida or a Texas or even Louisiana, some of the smaller states. I think people are mostly wearing masks. I'm not sure what phase we're in, but I think we're probably going to have to go in the direction of shutting more stuff down eventually, because I just don't think it's sustainable having bars open at all, even if they're outside. I haven't been to a restaurant since this all started, and I avoid crowds as much as possible. I mean, I do go to the grocery store. I go for a walk at night to get some exercise, but other than going to work and the store, I'm not really around anyone outside of my immediate, a little bit of extended family, but even then, we're really social distancing and doing the best we can to avoid germs. But my school is opening. I work at a college and about an hour, 20 minutes west of Richmond. Right. I don't know if you've ever been through that part of Virginia. I know you've been to Richmond, but so it's a countryside, Farmville area, very rural. Students are coming back, so it's a small school. Hopefully, we won't have big problems, but I don't know.
I don't know if I got my geography wrong, but is that near Petersburg?
You're sort of west of Petersburg, like Appomattox. I don't know. Did you hit Appomattox at any point?
Yeah.
You're sort of on the road to Appomattox, maybe about halfway between Richmond and Appomattox.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But it's what you would expect probably from the Virginia countryside. It's very conservative, and there's a big rebel flag that I have to pass on my way to work. I'm sure you probably saw one of those either on I-95 or somewhere else. So you said you grew up pretty much in Rotterdam. Did you do your schooling there? College?
Yeah. I actually went to Erasmus University in Rotterdam to study philosophy.
Okay.
At that time, I was already working for the Dutch National Public Broadcaster, VPRO, working on the editorial department of a TV show called Metropolis, which was a worldwide network of independent filmmakers who were, making weekly segments on a given theme that we would we would assemble that together to have some sort of an overview of how the world handled certain topics differently, from traffic chaos to how do you deal with your pets or parents, or what does sexuality mean in your culture. Anyway, that's the place where my love for documentary really emerged, and sort of it got married with what I did in university. Philosophy is the drive. It's the thing that makes me ask questions and wonder. And film really became the medium to explore those questions.
In terms of philosophy, was there a particular time period or a particular philosopher that really grabbed you?
Well, I actually graduated. I wrote my master's thesis on something called the quarter life crisis. And for that, I found a unusual intellectual partner in Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, in my reading, became sort of the first quarter life crisis patient, just at the advent of, modern civic society that was no longer, limited by feudal ties, where people could actually aspire to realize their dreams. And with that, of course, comes the responsibility of, getting there, arriving at your destination and satisfying your ambitions. And, if you can't, then that's up to you, because you have the freedom. And I sort of traced that in Rousseau's work. And so that's a pretty unlikely person to end up, exploring in such a modern context. But I've been a fan ever since.
I'm guessing this documentary, Monumental Crossroads, that's made a pretty big splash, I'm guessing, in America. Obviously you had to come here and you had to do it, but maybe talk a little bit about how the film has been received and why you wanted to come here and do this type of movie.
Well, first about that splash, I'd like to think that's happening right now. I mean, for the past few months, we've been contacting universities, specifically history departments and American studies, Southern studies, African American studies, psychology departments on prejudice, race relations, these kinds of topics that all touch on the subject of the Confederate memorial debate. The response has been really good so far. I'm really happy to see that finally. I mean, we shot the film in 2017 and 18. Well, mostly in the summer that became known as the summer of Charlottesville. We traveled the South extensively after the memorials in New Orleans got taken down. I think the film was completed by the end of summer 2018. And ever since, I had been trying to find a proper audience for it, because what made me want to make this film actually originated in a Dutch newspaper, where I saw one of the first memorials in New Orleans being taken down. And it was this picture of, I think, the Beauregard statue, with city workers frantically trying to remove it, wearing helmets and bulletproof vests in the cover of darkness, flanked by opposing camps of demonstrators. You had the Black Lives Matter crowd on the one side, and the Southern Heritage supporters carrying AR-15 rifles on the other side. And I just kept looking at that picture thinking, and what then? Okay, so suppose you remove this monument to what to what end? What's next? I mean, if you look at the people that are framing this picture, it doesn't seem like they are getting anywhere nearer, to sort of common understanding, a common future. If anything, it seems like they get entrenched even more in their own points of view. And this is the dynamic that we have in the Netherlands as well, with subjects that touch on our own colonial and history of enslavement. And I just kept looking at that picture thinking, like, and what then? Okay, so suppose you remove this monument to what end? Like, what's next? I mean, if you look at the people that are framing this picture, it doesn't seem like they are getting anywhere nearer, to sort of common understanding, a common future. If anything, it seems like they get entrenched even more in their own points of view. And this is the dynamic that we have in the Netherlands as well, with subjects that touch on our own colonial and history of enslavement. And one thing in particular is that we have this blackface tradition called Zwarte Piet, Black Pete, part of our Dutch version of Santa Claus, which is called Sinterklaas. And I think you actually modeled your Santa on our Sinterklaas, who is a beardy guy, white big beard in a red suit, distributing presents to children. And somehow, when he moved to the other side of the Atlantic, he became sort of Coca-Cola obese. I think that's that's your cultural appropriation.
Yeah, but, right.
Anyway, his European cousin, he doesn't have little helpers in the form of elves, but actually they are called Black Petes, and they are, very happy guys prancing about, distributing presents and candy. But they look a lot like slaves, or at least they look like Moorish people. They have curly black hair, they have very dark skin, they have big red lips, classic blackface. In a way, this story, forgive me for rambling on about this one, but
no, sure.
In a way, this is a form of a celebration that you can find all across Europe, where this figure of Zwarte Piet often becomes a sort of black woodland creature or a monster, because this role that Black Pete has is to reward the children that have been good. But there's also this element of a scare tactic, that if you don't behave, he's gonna put you in the bag and take you with him back to Spain. If you didn't behave.
Wow.
And so you find these characters all through European traditions, but none of them look like they could be enslaved people, but ours do. And but of course the people say, it has nothing to do with slavery. That's just our tradition. And, it's a children's party and you should just leave it alone. And this is how we do things and it shouldn't change. Even though this figure of Black Pete has always changed and actually isn't really that old. I think it's from the mid-19th century. So our debate in the past decade or so has become a tradition by itself, where we have an increasingly short-tempered debate on who is this character and should it be changed or removed completely. And now we're finally getting there. Facebook has just announced this week that they are banning Jewish caricatures and Black Pete. So they're actually on the same level, according to Zuckerberg and his friends. So we now have this whole revolt going on. People think it's scandalous that Facebook is censoring their children's party, but it's had its longest days, that's for sure. And the kids, they just want presents. They don't care if the guy is black or white or has like soot black marks on his face because he fell down the chimney or whatever they're trying to spin, how they try to spin it now. So, but to get back to the actual point, we have these kind of heritage versus hate debates here as well. And this is the black face tradition is one example. But I never felt inclined to actually make something about that specifically, because it really is an entrenched debate, and there's a lot being done already. But
Yeah.
it sort of struck me that what was happening in the south of the U.S. Had a similar mechanism behind it, and for a Dutch audience might be actually an exotic new way of looking at something that we know all too well ourselves. So I actually went to New Orleans thinking I could make a film about these current events for an audience back home. And I had been to the South before, especially New Orleans, which I adore. But I never had a mission to sort of look for stories like this. And when I did this time and started looking through the lens of 400 years of racial inequality and all the hardship that's involved with it, and how tangible that still is in a lot of ways today, I just dropped the notion of doing this sort of comparative study, because it's too big and too different. I figured, let me just do this story by itself and try to also learn more about it. And as a result, 2 years later, I had a film that was basically an American film made by a Dutch guy that nobody in the US was waiting for, basically. And in the Netherlands, it's a film about the Confederate memorial debate and the legacy of slavery, which is too specific for most people. You need to know something about the subject for it to mean something to you. And so it was only, after a while, after trying film festivals, TV stations, and universities, that it became clear that it really is it's a conversational piece. It's an educational tool, and it really fits well within the educational community, and also like civil rights organizations who would like to share content like that with their members. But yeah, so it's not so much a TV film, but more an educational tool. And being from abroad actually became a plus, according to a lot of academic reviewers.
Well, I think it's a perfect movie for a classroom or to get a conversation going about these topics, because, as you say, it's very kind of conversational. You have a bunch of viewpoints of people in different states. You talk to, I'd say it's about 50-50 between white and black people, and not necessarily they're all on the same side of something. You have that one guy, African American in Asheville, who walks around waving a Confederate. I've heard of that guy. And so you talk to him, but you go to Whitney Plantation, you start in New Orleans. So it covers a lot of ground geographically, but also I think you do a good job in about 90 minutes getting these various viewpoints in, some which are pretty emotionally based. And I think maybe it's all kind of emotional when you come down to it. But you talk to people from various institutions, so there's kind of an institutional mix there too. But you said you'd been to the U.S. before. The movie starts around 2017. I'm guessing, have you always kind of followed this larger debate in America about maybe the Civil War, slavery? I'm guessing when Dylann Roof shot up the church in Charleston, that must have made a pretty big splash in the European press. When did you start thinking about doing this? I know you were there in 2017, but when did it kind of hatch in your brain?
Well, that early impetus really was seeing that photo in the newspaper, and in May 2017, and within 2 weeks I was there. I grabbed a lot of books, resources to do desk research, and then went on to do research on the ground in New Orleans, and things started happening from there. So, of course, the Charleston Massacre, it made the headlines in Europe. I remember thinking about it and or reading about it, and just how horrible that was. But that wasn't in itself the reason for going. It was a year before that I went to New Orleans for the first time. So in 2014, I actually remember walking across Lee Circle with this huge towering monument to Robert E. Lee perched on top of what's that, like a 60-foot pillar or something? It's humongous.
It's way up there.
Yeah. but being not much aware of this whole history and the sort of contested nature also of that place, because I can't remember thinking anything about it other than what a big place and monument. So honestly, I mean, in Europe or specifically in the Netherlands, we don't get a lot of American history, or not to that level of detail that I would have known who Robert E. Lee was, other than reruns of the Dukes of Hazzard, But we are inundated with American popular culture, so you from the periphery, that there's a lot of stuff, and there's this sort of stereotype about the South, and the Civil War. Of course, it rings a bell, and it here that was just about slavery, and so there's not much details and not much nuance to actually properly understand how that all came to pass and what happened after. So really only after that first visit to New Orleans, and then after the Dillon Roof massacre, did I start to read on how these things fit together, the whole heritage culture, and I think since then it was on my radar, and I started reading about it and just being interested in the subject. But it took till May 2017 when I saw that picture of the Beauregard statue being removed, that I felt like this is something I want to chase now. It was also perfect timing. I mean, it's not easy to independently make films, let alone to grab your bags and hop to a different continent to make a story about something that is pretty far removed from your own life, both literally and figuratively. So for me, it being the summer months, it felt like that's a good reason. It's a good opportunity to go to the US for summer and do a nice project there. And like I also said about how it shared the same dynamic in a way with our blackface tradition. It just came together in that sense for me to go there at that point.
Well, summer in the South, so you were diving right into it. All the heat and the humidity.
I had no clue.
You're in a fairly mild climate in the Netherlands, and I mean, I've been in the South for a while. It's just something you gotta put up with. But when you're walking around, it can be rough. So you got there not long after the Lee statue. You said Beauregard. Those statues had just come down when you started filming.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a little time. Okay. I was not correct on the date. So those statues, they got removed in May. That's when I made plans, booked tickets, and did some desk research. In the meantime, I went there by mid-June to do some research on the ground, and we didn't start filming till July 2nd, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had we witnessed Independence Day at Stone Mountain, Georgia, in some Walmart wife beaters with a lot of crazy American flags and bald eagles screaming, "I can't hear you over the sound of my freedom."
That's a wild scene. When I kind of forgot about that scene where they're the laser show. It's very bizarre and kitschy and very American in kind of a dark
insane
way. But I myself had kind of forgotten how short a time there was between Lee coming down May 2017 and then the Charlottesville riot.
Yeah.
Like when were you there? You were not there, or you were?
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes with documentary films, all the time, actually. Of course, you don't control reality. So sometimes it's a bit of a hit and miss. Sometimes you get lucky and you're there at the right moment, and only to notice later on that it wasn't the right moment, as was the case with Charlottesville, because there's actually been 3 big protests there, or the first one wasn't that big, but I think back in June already, so days after the Lee Memorial coming down in New Orleans, there was already a march in Charlottesville. When we were there, when we were stateside, we got wind of a rally being organized by the KKK in Charlottesville on, I think it was July 7th or something. And so that's the one we went to. And in the media, you often see the images being intermingled with the Unite the Right rally of August 11, I think it was. And so we had already made a scene, and we were actually back home when this Unite the Right rally started, developing. And we took a long time thinking if we should be back for it, and to also cover that one. And I'm glad we didn't, because we didn't because we didn't have an inside. And of course, we were already with the original, or with the KKK rally, we were stuck in the middle. The authorities had used the press as sort of a separator, a cordon sanitaire between the KKK and all the counter-protesters, which was really awful because, everybody was armed, and except for us, we only had cameras. Right. But we were blank, point blank in the middle, and which was a good vantage point wise, because we could sort of get very close to those KKK members trying to make their point, as well as the opposing demonstrators who tried to shoo them off. And it became a really, stylized display of how they end up as shouting matches. And for the film, that really was all we ended up needing. So having the Unite the Right rally in there would have gotten the same material unless we had somebody really on the inside, meaning that you would actually go along really with either activist groups or extremists. And the point of the movie was to sort of stay clear of that and try to sort of stay with, basically common people who do take, matters in their own hands, or who take it too hard, who are active. But we really didn't want to. We really wanted to see what regular people thought about these issues and how they dealt with them. So, right. I'm glad we didn't go. And of course, the horrible killing that took place at the Unite the Right rally, that's what got stuck on everybody's mind, rightfully so. But referring to the United Right rally is almost impossible without referring to that event. And it would have led away, I guess, from the function that protest had in the film to begin with.
Okay, between Lee coming down New Orleans and the deadly riot in Charlottesville, it's actually a couple months. I mean, It's not that long, but and actually, I think today is the anniversary of Heather Heyer getting killed in Charlottesville. We're recording on the 12th.
You are right. Yeah.
So
I didn't even.
That's kind of freaky. But you're right. There are a series of demonstrations and counter demonstrations leading up to that, because Lee came down in New Orleans, and then Charlottesville voted to take him down, and then it got challenged, and then I think you started to see the people assembling, and then it kind of leads up to the Unite the Right rally. Okay, so you weren't there for that. You're right. It's probably for the best. But in terms of these other people that you talked to, like that old white guy in Alabama, how did you meet him?
Actually, that's a relative of our associate producer, a friend of mine who is in the film business in New Orleans, who I met on my first visit to that city. She was immediately on board when I said I want to make this film together with my colleague and cameraman Ruben Hamelink. And I said, do you want to tag along? Because, I could use some help, not because, she has this, or can have this gorgeous Southern drawl that would, at least be familiar to people, and would pave the way, basically, for us, if if you could introduce us to several people, then we could swoop in after and be the sort of naive Europeans who don't know any better. And that worked
Right.
especially well with Sons of Confederate Veterans, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit. But she came to me at one point and she said, well, I have this relative who's living, really up in the sticks in Alabama. And it's not like he's necessarily a bad guy or anything, but he's like the prototype old-timey Southerner who just his ideas, they are so outdated you can't believe it. And I think it would be good to have him in the film. And so, with her family's blessing, we did. Yeah, it's a remarkable scene, especially if you realize that this man is actually grandfather to a adopted African-American girl who he loves dearly. It's hard to combine that with his remarks saying that, people of different races should stay among themselves, for example, because that's how God intended it. And so it was really, well, let me say most of those interviews actually were pretty tough on the ears and took a lot of patience to get through. But this one certainly was one of them. And combine that with Alabama heat in July, and I was suffering.
Well, and it's interesting because you talked about the Dukes of Hazzard when you were growing up watching. I mean, I used to watch that show too when I was a kid, and I don't think it ever got into the race issue. But when I was growing up, you got this very sort of cartoonish version of the South. And as I got older, I knew what things like the Ku Klux Klan were. You'd see them on reality TV shows, busting up sets on Jerry Springer or whatever. And again, it's kind of a very cartoonish version in the other direction, a negative way. But I think as you get older, you realize like this guy in Alabama, that's kind of more how you see this work its way out. It's a lot of people who maybe are even responsible for systematic racism. They're, for lack of a better word, nice people. Like, you can talk to them and it might get heated, but it might not. But they're smiling, and you talk to a woman later who's very kind of cheerful and outgoing, and she has kind of her own view on all these things. But I think it's a way it's trickier to either depict someone like that or talk to someone like that. In a way, it's easier to, if you want to sort of dismantle their beliefs, the guy from the Sons of Confederate Veterans is a bit easier because he sort of contradicts himself. He has these talking points. He's kind of going through his mind. He's kind of spewing back out. But in a way, these people that are just kind of talking from the heart or their upbringing or whatever, it's almost it's a bit trickier, I think, sometimes to deal with that. I don't know. What do you think? Like, did some of these people acquit themselves better in your mind, or are you just kind of trying to maintain some objectivity? Because they all have their various point of view, but where some of the people you're just kind of shaking your head more than others. I don't know.
Well, I had to bite my tongue a whole lot of times. But you're right. It's very tricky, and in different ways, because like the cheerful lady, she's with the hairdresser who looks a bit like Dolly Parton.
Right.
She's actually with the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and she had just finished putting up a new Confederate monument just weeks ago. So she has a definite, clear agenda, as does that executive director of the SCV. And those are tricky because, especially the one with him, that's a 3-hour standing interview in in October, Tennessee weather, which was also still pretty warm. So my cameraman almost fainted because he wasn't allowed to put a tripod down. And I didn't expect for the interview to run this long, but as this was our second tour. We came back in October to sort of shoot additional scenes and to have the foundation of the film based on the first interviews we recorded. And then you see what are the gaps that need filling. And I really did want to get close to that Sons of Confederate Veterans organization, also because they are actually constructing a huge museum to the actual Southern history. And this kind of energy, you cannot look past it. I mean, they are going to determine a narrative that a lot of people are drawn to, and it's sort of institutionalized. I think they just opened a month ago, finally. This is all based on volunteer contributions and volunteer work. So here we use this trick where our associate producer, also a Tennessee native, just got familiar with the guy, talking about the beautiful countryside and what have you, and the film project, and then introduced us. And so normally you would go through the press office of the SCV and they just sort of stick to their script about what they want to tell you and what not. It was actually the Black Confederate guy, H.K. Edgerton, who got us in touch with SCV. They knew each other.
Okay.
And that's how we got our little get-together at their headquarters. And there was no press officer. It was just him taking the time to tell these European students of history a bit about their mission, right? And he didn't know how well prepared I came ready to dispel a whole lot of their talking points. And so that became a really, really tough, long-winded interview where, of course, you don't have the room in the film to show it all, right? But it was a very serious, deep, and difficult conversation, where a lot of these kind of people, they who propagate these lost cause narratives, they stick to factoids that in themselves are true to spin a story that really isn't. I mean, like I don't know, for example, how the first person to be enslaved for life was actually owned by a black slaveholder. Well, this apparently is true. Some plantation owner had a runaway slave who kept escaping, and after 3 times catching him back, he sort of filed a lawsuit against this person, saying like, all this economic damage that he has brought upon me, he can't work it off, even if he would stay with me for his entire life. And apparently the court ruled in that favor, that the chattel period of what should have been like 10 years was actually extended to life. And that is how lifelong servitude came into existence as far as I read the story. And this happened to be a black planter. But doesn't mean that is all of a sudden representative for the entire plantation-based society in the South, of course. But they managed to create this whole world view based on these factoids, and you have to constantly punch through all of these anecdotal, basically, forms of evidence to get back to the bigger picture. And the bigger picture, in the end, always boils down to the basic question of enslaving people, and how do you morally navigate that? I mean, that's the hot button issue that they at all costs try to avoid. And that's something that the SCV commander, he wasn't prepared for me to be so inquisitive and have so many like counter arguments prepared. So in the end, I did get him to sort of say stuff that I'm sure his SCV press office wouldn't have let him say otherwise. They wouldn't have allowed it, in terms of, their actual views. He sort of pauses for a moment, doesn't want to talk anymore, and he then does, probably thinking, well, this is for some European whatever program anyway, not knowing that he would actually be college material in a lot of U.S. universities 2 years later.
Well, it's funny too, because they're so wrapped up in these issues, and they believe these things so deeply. But there's also this sort of, I don't know if I want to call it shame, but kind of, they also want to look as good as they can to other people. And you kind of see
Right.
this ideology has been very consistent over the years. I mean, the guy from the SCV, I mean, he's like something out of the early 60s or 50s. I mean, it's kind of the same
Right.
lost cause, and it goes back to the 19th century too. But I don't know. I guess there is this sort of, whatever you want to call it, like bourgeois, self-consciousness or whatever, that like, well, I don't want to look like a wacko. And I'm sure the SCV guy, he looks at someone like H.K. Edgerton. On the one hand, he's like, oh, great, we have African American in our camp. Kind of like when Trump says, there's my African American. But at the same time, he's like, well, I'm not like that guy. I'm not shouting from the corners holding the rebel flag. Like, I'm sort of the upper crust of the lost cause. But he's doing a lot more damage than someone like Edgerton is, who I hope we can talk about him. He has been trotted out a lot at meetings and events and stuff to kind of buttress this lost cause idea. Well, if a African American guy believes this, then it wasn't about slavery. It wasn't about racism. And I didn't know he was in Asheville. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I didn't see him while I was there, but it's just kind of funny that coincidence. But what did you know about his background? I mean, he's, I mean, I hate to say this, but like, he just seems like kind of a sad character. But like, how did you hear about him? Like, what is his situation down there exactly? I mean, what's going on with him?
Yeah, I wouldn't know what's going on with him right now. But he actually wasn't even on my radar while we were traveling the South. I was pointed to him. We were trying to get some shop owners of a Dixie Outfitters branch that sell all kinds of rebel paraphernalia like mugs and t-shirts and stuff to do an interview with them, and they declined. They said they had been cheated by the media too often to trust anybody else with a camera. And well, I can imagine where that's coming from, but they said, well, the guy that you really ought to be talking to is this guy. And so and that's the sort of serendipity that you have, that you find on the road. And also while doing filmmaking in like documentary filmmaking oftentimes. And so sometimes things have this way of working out by themselves. And so we got in touch with him, and he has some sort of publicist agent who determines who he should be talking to, who's in Florida, so like a long way away. And we got greenlit. Vice had been trying to get to him, and they wouldn't. She wouldn't allow them to talk to HK, but she trusted us with his legacy, basically. So we met in Asheville at his house, which was also bloody hot. I mean that. I remember especially all the mosquito bites on his porch. While he rambled for hours. He basically, I don't even think I got a question in. He just talked for 2 hours. This time I had my cameraman sitting, so he didn't suffer as much. But my strategy was to just, let him spill everything, let him do his thing, say whatever's on his mind, and then maybe I can then coax him into, a few situations where I get what I think this should look like or be like. So we already had done the whole spiel basically at his porch, which is not in the film. And the guy has read everything there is in Confederate diaries and books, and every source he could find, private libraries from notable friends. He read everything, and he has this, somebody said, a sort of a Shakespearean quality to his character. He has such an intensity and a sense of drama when he's making his point. And he just, if there's somebody who is sort of, I don't know, freestyling lost cause stories, it's him. I mean, everybody sticks to some sort of a script, but he has this sort of, I would call it a quality to, create these stories out of whole cloth, basically. And again, it's not that these are untruths. They're not falsehoods. They are factoids that in themselves are true. But he has this virtuosity where he spins that into arguments to basically claim whatever is in his head, and that's a lot of different things. Basically with him, the film pivots into the sort of north versus south dynamic, where I was actually scolded many times for calling it the Civil War when I was in the South. Mostly it would have been the war should have been the war between the states, but some people like that hairdresser lady. She was adamant that I should call it the War of Northern Aggression, and
Right.
And they live by it, and they say it's an offense to say anything else to me. Then you don't know what this is about.
I think, with Edgerton, he's such an
Right.
extreme character, and there's like a pathology there, but in a way he's kind of likable
Yeah.
to the extent that he believes it so much. And I mean, I'm not really sure about his background and where he's kind of at. If he was in New Orleans, you could maybe see him like Jackson Square in a soapbox or something. Like that would be kind of his ultimate
Right.
audience. But he's in Asheville kind of wandering around, and maybe some people kind of just look at him as the town eccentric, and maybe other people are like, I'm so sick of that guy. And some people drive by and they swear at him. Other people probably like him. But it's interesting to see what's changed since you've made the movie, because he goes up to the Vance statue in downtown Asheville, and that is now covered up. I'm assuming you've heard about that. Like the statue now is there's got like a black tarp
indirectly.
on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
On our Facebook page, the films, we had put a couple of promo videos, like excerpts, to introduce all the characters. And HK basically half of his bit is a scene on the highway where people start cursing at him and driving by and waving at him, and the other part is indeed in front of the Vance statue downtown. The clip that we chose to put online has him telling about the sense of family in the South before the North came to wreck it. And he's saying that in front of that Vance monument. I was shocked to see that people, supporters of that monument, being unaltered, had found that clip and started sharing it, and it went viral. It was seen about 400,000 times in just the course of a few days or weeks. Shared, I think, 7,000 times. And as much as I did to change the context of that video by adding like an opposite view of a New Orleans-based spray paint artist, B-Mike, I added links to it and whatever. People just disregard it, and they just keep on sharing it because, they see what they like and they disregard what they don't like. It's very cynical. I was about to just, remove it entirely because all of a sudden, I'm giving a platform to this guy out of context, which is the least that it's the last thing that I want. But, I ended up having it online. People said, even if there's a few people who do click on those links to the other stories that you have published, then that would be a good thing. But I'm still not so sure about it. But, I guess everybody takes their own history, that takes their own thing from it.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, in a way there, you just sort of summed up the whole movie in that you have this footage that people are appropriating for their own uses and making it instantly partisan, which is, a lot of the problem we have right now. It's like we're so divided along party lines that the history of people like Edgerton and SCV, there's no way to really unpack it as a historian. You can't really penetrate that bubble because there's so much, they're coming at you. They're so aggressive with it that if you try to take it apart piece by piece, I mean, you just spend the rest of your life doing it. And even if you can disprove something factually, and as you say, they do use facts, but they spin them a certain way. I think a lot of historians get very frustrated. They just kind of say, well, what's the point? I mean, I can't really reach these people. They're just too far gone ideologically.
Exactly.
So
it's not a problem of history.
Yeah, and obviously, you want teachers to use this and students to discuss it. And it's great now because everybody's doing stuff online. You could watch the movie and you could, certainly write a lot about it and if not debate it in classrooms.
Yeah.
But did you kind of come away with this project with a kind of a different take on America and race relations, or how did you kind of feel after doing this tour and finishing the film?
Well, it's been a learning experience in a lot of ways. I mean, on the level of filmmaking, this turned out to be a huge project, a feature documentary on a different continent, not financed by any external party, trying to find an audience which is also far away from home. And, in terms of both the creative aspect and the business aspect of filmmaking, it's been a hell of a ride. I've learned so much in these three years. And then, of course, there's all the time that you sort of intellectually devote to subjects like this that aren't even, they're not part of my everyday life, in the sense that I can have a complete understanding of my own environment in the Netherlands without ever reading another book on the Civil War. But yet, I'm knee deep in it. I have learned a lot about race relations, about Southern history, about the American history more in general, and how also the view of the South changed. That, of course, it's very valuable to me on a personal level. In a way, the result is very rewarding, because the film now being used in universities and communities who use it as an educational tool. That's something that I, would just a few people together made happen, and I'm very happy to be able to contribute something to that conversation. Also valuable here, because we take a lot of cues from America, and that is strange, because in a lot of way our problems predecess yours. I mean, it is strange that we have, for example, Black Lives Matter as a institution, well, not an institution, but as a sort of imported American movement, where we could have had our own, regardless of development in American society and that particular history. We don't, and that's of course because we get flooded by American media. We have we all, at least in Western Europe, we have a tendency to watch a lot of American media and events. We live in a globalized society. So it's hard not to also. But what I think is a pitfall is that we start importing these hotly debated issues without regard for the local context. And that's, I think, is it can be very detrimental to the conversation. If you don't, I dare to say that practically nobody in my country understands what institutional racism is, if you mean this in how this works in the U.S., like the amount of policies that all and traditions and sort of cultural roots that all tie in together to form a system of oppression that was sort of designed to keep this disparity between the races to oppress Black people. You cannot use that same concept and everything that is tied to it in a society like the Netherlands that is radically different from the history that you have. I mean, things like redlining and gerrymandering and the whole prison industrial complex, and how slavery changed into the Code Noir and the Jim Crow laws, and how you can even to this day go watch a prison rodeo at the farm in Louisiana and see a bunch of Black prisoners being taken on the horns by a bull, who will die either by that bull or at the end of their life on this prison farm, which is still a cotton plantation. it is insane to see, in how many ways the old days still have an immeasurable impact on the lives of people, of Black people in the U.S. and
Sure.
in ways that that history does not exist here. And
I know now is a terrible time for travel and coming to the U.S., but do you think maybe someday you do kind of a follow-up or some kind of sequel to Monumental Crossroads? There's still a lot going on now, and I think there will be for a while. Would you maybe think about that?
I've got that question a lot recently, and honestly, in terms of a sequel, I haven't been thinking much about it. Of course, there's a whole lot happening,
right,
but they are also sort of symptoms of an issue that I think the film already explores in an interesting way that will be relevant for years to come, because now it's monuments, but then there are still thousands of school names and other institutions that still have names of Confederate generals and other notable figures. And even if all those tangible symbols are gone, then it's still about what's in the mind of people, about how they hold on to certain histories or certain ideas, just like that old grandpa that you mentioned in the film, sort of farmer in Alabama with his sort of outdated ideas. He didn't need any monuments. He didn't need any visible reminder, school names or whatever, to have those ideas. So even if you remove them, you still need to do the work of having people want to change their minds. And in a way, what I also think is interesting, the African-American artist, B-Mike, in the film, he creates these gorgeous murals everywhere in the U.S. of civil rights leaders and other prominent African-Americans, musicians, artists, whatever. And I think he had one of the most interesting points I've heard to date on this, saying that in a way, removing all of this tangible history was also a loss to him, he said, because he was well aware of how this history of oppression was also formative of Black culture to a large degree, in forms of the music and literature and food, and in ways that he said we managed to be alchemists with our history of oppression and turn it into something beautiful. And if you remove those reminders, you also remove part of what is formative of our culture. So in a way, he said, it also belongs to us, not in a good way. And he certainly didn't mean for everything to just remain as it was, but the sort of idea of, I like to call it sort of child-proofing public space where there's nothing that you could be offended by. That's in itself a problematic, notion, I mean, first of all, where's that boundary where, just generally, philosophically speaking, if it's a good thing that you remove symbols that are, offensive to this or that party, where does that stop? Like how much would eventually be slated for removal? What kind of public space do you end up with? And, also on a psychological level, in a way, isn't it good to have some experience basically dealing with stuff that you might not agree with, that you might find reprehensible, or this is me rambling now, but the notion of like safe spaces in universities where whole subjects be sort of censored or not discussed because students might be triggered and get emotional, instead of on an academic level work through the material. I think that's a dangerous course of action. I mean, you grow from dealing with stuff that you don't know or that you don't readily like, and have to sort of find a way to engage with. And of course, That doesn't mean to say that's not to say like for everybody who doesn't like all these all these expressions of dominant culture. If you don't like it, then well, that's your loss because you could learn something from it. I mean, of course, it's a whole lot has to do about intention, with what reason things like monuments get erected in the first place, like the General Ely statue. There's a clear distinction between remembrance and reverence, right? I mean,
Right.
The mayor back then, Mitch Landrieu, he had a terrific speech about exactly what it was, that statue, and towering this high over the city, almost like a sun dial of racism, basically throwing its shadow over an entire city that didn't particularly felt like revering this guy. That to me is a clear-cut case, of things that need to change.
Right.
But I do think that, on whole, each community should be able to decide for themselves what to do with elements like these monuments, and also on a to do that in every particular case in their own way, because there might be smaller monuments, like also in the film there's one in Knoxville, to the common soldiers who fell, who died in this battle, and this sort of very bare, modest piece of granite, it commemorates the lives that were lost. Well, and most people don't even realize it's a Confederate statue. I can imagine that's one that maybe just deserves a place as just a commemoration of all the needless lives that get lost in all kinds of wars.
Yeah. What people might not know, either in America or elsewhere, is, I mean, these statues are everywhere in the South.
Yeah.
I mean, like pretty much every courthouse has a Confederate monument, or to the soldiers of the whatever, something a little bit more generic, but
exactly.
There are hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So whatever happens in New Orleans or Richmond, you are just kind of tip of the iceberg with that process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and in that sense, I do believe that I don't readily need to make a sequel to this film, that it will remain relevant for a long time. What I would hope, if all this pandemic worry disappear, is that we might, do a U.S. college screening tour, with have the makers present, engage in conversation. Some of the universities that are licensing the film are asking to do just that. Let's have a sort of a Zoom based meeting, like a Q&A with their students after they see the film. And I love to engage with students in this way. So I would especially love it if we could manage to come over at some point and do that in real life. But well, who knows?
Right. When that might be. But
exactly.
Well, congratulations on it and all your other work. I know I saw Monumental Crossroads. It was on Amazon. Are there other places people can get it?
Definitely. The film is available on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, exactly, and on Vimeo. And then there's for the educational options, there's Canopy, and universities are licensing the film more and more. So there's a chance that that people can access it through their own educational institution. We're still very much in the process of that. We also want to reach out specifically to public libraries to see if they would like to license the film, as well as advanced placement history classes in K-12 education. There's still a lot of work to do, and we're just a small production company based in the Netherlands trying to get this across the entire United States. So you can imagine we've got some work to do. So everybody, please spread the word. That would be very helpful.
Well, I mean, on top of all the content, I mean, it's an entertaining movie to watch. It goes along at a good pace. So it's for, academics and students, but I think just anybody that's interested in this could certainly check it out.
Definitely.
So,
if they didn't hate my accent so far, they will they will be good, because I do the narration in the film as well.
But no, it looks good, and I mean there's just some good scenery on top of everything, because you're in the Deep South, and so you're in the bayous and the nice colonial parts of town, things like that. So. Well, it's been great talking to you, Tim. Thanks for doing this, and good luck with your current project.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed it.
All right, that was my talk with Tim Vandenhoff. I hope you enjoyed that. You can check out Tim's documentary, Monumental Crossroads. You can get that on Amazon Prime. Definitely check that out if you are interested in the Civil War memory, and the whole Confederate monument debate. I was in the fan district yesterday of Richmond and drove by the Stonewall Jackson statue, which doesn't have Jackson on it anymore, but it's definitely got some graffiti and seems to be getting updated based on whatever has happened in the last week or two in terms of police brutality and the police killings. They'll spray paint a new name on there, so it's kind of a billboard for racial injustice. But the city is thinking about getting rid of the A.P. Hill monument, which is in the city limits. If they could get rid of A.P. Hill, that would be good just for the traffic, because it is in the middle of a busy intersection, and he doesn't really belong there, since the location he is buried has nothing to do with him. He wasn't from Richmond. He wasn't killed in that particular location. He was killed down in Petersburg, but they moved him there during the big Lost Cause construction project. So we'll see what's going to happen to General Hill. You can support the American Rambler podcast by buying my book, Marching Masters, Slavery, Race, and the Confederate Army During the Civil War, or you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/American Rambler, and kick in $1 or $2 every month. Had a good month in August. Very pleased about that. I think it was the best month I've ever had. And hopefully September will be even better, so keep listening, spread the word. All the episodes are free in the backlog, so check them out. And you can also check out the movie podcast I do with Adam Bulger called Cinema Death Cult. On the most recent episode of Cinema Death Cult, we looked at the movie Paris, Texas. We've also critiqued Wonder Woman and All Quiet on the Western Front, some classics, but also some newer things. So if you want to hear me talk about movies, and I think Adam and I have a good rapport, check out Cinema Death Cult. All right, well, the weather has cooled off and the humidity is gone. It is a nice, warm, sunny day, like it should be. I think mid-80s today, but I got the windows open, just trying to get some fresh air in. I think it's going to heat up soon, so we'll enjoy it while it lasts. Good day for swimming. I hope you're doing okay. Avoid the COVID, wash your hands, wear your mask. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.